Welcome to the Mind for Success podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Lebbing, and I love seeing business professionals, leaders, and entrepreneurs have massive success in their businesses. Are you ready to reach a higher level in your business? Are you looking to rise to the top and break through the barriers that are holding you back? If this is you, join us on the Mind for Success podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Mind for Success podcast. And I am really excited today to bring on someone I met recently, but I know he's going to bring you so much value. His name is Barry Gleeson, and he works with owners and leaders of privately held family businesses. And he's got a passion for helping them break through the status quo. He is the managing partner of the Kelsey Group and is the owner of the Alternative Board franchise, which is an internal peer advisory and executive coaching organization in St. Louis. And I'm going to let him tell you all about that. He's been doing this for a long time. And he's very, very knowledgeable. We're going to talk about scaling your business and all the ins and outs of that. And without further ado, welcome, Barry.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Kim.
You are quite welcome. So I want to get started, and I always ask my guests, what's your backstory? So how did you get started in doing what you're doing?
The honest answer, it's accidental.
I love that. That happens a lot.
So I couldn't find my way. So I spent many years in corporate America, very large corporation, wearing many hats. Always had an itch to do my own thing. I grew up in a family business for about a decade, and it just gave me this passion for it. And I finally got my way, and that's a double-edged sword. You know, you want to be a business owner, do you? And then you get into it and you find out the realities. But I just felt this itch, and I just am very passionate about small business, and I'm sympathetic to the owners and what they have to sacrifice to be able to make it a living and make it successful. And I got in on my own, started a company called Marketing Solutions in 2004, and along that journey, colleague of mine who's now my ex-business partner approached me and asked me if I wanted to be a business coach and run these peer groups with him. And I didn't know anything about it. And I looked into it and was intrigued. I said, sure, and went and got certified in that process and loved it. And then kept adding to my repertoire, if you will, of services as a company. So today I'm a business coach and advisor. I'm a scaling up growth coach for the Scaling Up organization, if anybody listening is familiar with that. And my purpose is really to help business owners scale their business and have more fun along the way. Because it's really a tall challenge to run a business. So that's kind of the quick backstory.
I love it. I love it. And so many people fall into their business accidentally. But it sounds like the rest of the story really wasn't accidental at all. You were very purposeful.
I am at this point, yes, but a little bit later calling in life.
Yes. I understand that. So scaling up, we talked about that. Can you go into a little bit about what that means to a business owner and why would they want to? And
Sure. Well, the backdrop on that is many people are familiar with the book and the concept of mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Mm-hmm. That book came out in 2002, and it was groundbreaking. It was just a really good consolidation of best thought leaders' practices for business to operate in an operating system, something more formal. There's nothing really new about it. It was just a consolidation of really good processes. The most popular of which is Jim Collins and his work in Good to Great and the other books that he authored. And in 2015, Vern Harnish, the author of Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, updated that book titled Scaling Up, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits 2.0. And that started a much more momentum for the organization. Scaling Up is under the ownership of the corporate ownership is Gazelle's Inc. But we brand ourselves in the world under Scaling Up. So it's a multifaceted organization. We have an educational arm called the Growth Institute. We have a coaching body called the Scale Up Coaches. We have annual summits that 1,000 people from around the world attend twice a year, which is pretty fascinating. There's quite a bit of services there that are all designed to help serious business owners and their leadership teams face the brutal facts that are holding their company back and address them in a way that's very productive. It's different than typical strategic planning, Kim, in that we take that concept of strategic planning and break it into two things: strategic thinking and then execution planning. Mm-hmm. And most companies that do strategic planning will do an annual plan and then try to address it throughout the year. Whereas our system, our clients are expected, and they have the discipline to look at where they are on their project or their progress every week, frankly. And then quarterly planning sessions and annual planning sessions. So there's a meeting rhythm and cadence to execution that is normally void in most strategic planning, and ours encompasses both. So it's really an operating performance platform that companies can look at, and there's four main pillars. One is people. You got to have the right people. The old cliche, right people on the bus in the right seat doing the right things.
Right.
Then you have to have the right strategy. So are you generating revenue effectively and sustainably? If not, there's issue there. Are you executing in a way where you're converting that revenue into profits, industry leading profits? And we benchmark there. We have tools for that. We have tools for all these. And then the last pillar of scaling up is cash. Do you have enough cash to fuel your own growth? And for most companies, the answer is no. In fact, for a lot of them, that's their number one issue. They're undercapitalized and they don't have the resources to scale. So those are the four pillars, and that's kind of the broad view of scaling up. It's really designed to help companies really address anything that's holding them back in growth.
Okay. So we talked a lot about the scaling part before. When we talked about doing this podcast together, you talked a lot about exit planning as well. How does that work into this? And what are your thoughts on that, or how does that play a part?
One leads the other. So if you're a $5 million company and you could be a $10, $20 million company at exit. So maybe 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever it is down the road, all business owners will exit their business one way or the other. Standing up or feet first, right?
Right.
So there's a strategy there. There is a decision to be made. How am I going to exit this business? And how can I maximize that exit? And where scaling up and exit planning fits together is, if you're trying to drive the multiple, if you will, like a multiple of your earnings for an exit price, which is typical in the industry, in the mergers and acquisitions world, like a 5 multiple of your earnings is what typically sets the price. And there's lots to that we don't have time to get into. But to drive that multiple, to drive that amount of that transaction is obviously a huge initiative for business owners, because that might be the biggest financial transaction of their life, is selling their business. We want to be able to maximize that. So it may take 5 years or more to optimize a business in order for it to run on its own without dependency on a single person like the owner, which is typical for most businesses, to where it can operate and drive all those things that I mentioned: right people, right strategy, right execution, and good cash management. And when you have that, then you're a very attractive target for buyers, either financial buyer or strategic buyer. And so driving towards an exit is a very deliberate process to maximize your future net worth. And so they are not, they are codependent. Let me put it that way.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a little bit of a rhetorical question, probably for you, but when is the best time to start planning an exit strategy?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer because it's not rhetorical for me. So I've got young and old clients. Most of my clients are baby boomers and they're getting ready to sell. And so I see this. In fact, statistically worldwide, the baby boomer generation is creating a tidal wave of business exiting. And many people are familiar with the wealth transfer that's occurring, trillions of dollars in transfer wealth is occurring as we speak. Well, there's 10,000 businesses a day that want to sell. That's staggering. Those are baby boomer businesses. Only about 20% of those are going to sell. The younger owners that I talk with about exit planning or preparing their business laugh at me and say, that's not relevant at all. I'm only, I'll say 40, 45 years old. I'm not going to retire for a long, long time. And my pushback to them is, it's a question, is like, well, wouldn't you want to have your business running the best it could today and benefit from that today and not wait for the future and sell it to somebody else to get all that benefit? So it's very important for business owners to understand that if they work on their business today and they're all too busy caught up working in the business, which is the biggest challenge I see of all of my clients, the day-to-day noise, but they need to be working on the business to drive it, to make it productive, make it profitable so they can give back to community and employees and give opportunities to others. And that there's no reason to wait for that. I just don't understand where companies think, or owners that think, I don't need to worry about exiting. They do. They just haven't realized the benefit that they could achieve today by doing that.
Right, right. I can see that. And I see how the two totally fit together. And I would imagine if you get one, then you would get the value of the other.
It won't hurt, that's for sure. If you're diligent about working on your business, and think about the numbers. So let's say on my example, a $5 million company, let's say they're generating $500,000 in earnings, in profit, not gross, but net profit before taxes. If you were to get a multiple of 5x on that, obviously it's $2.5 million of company value. That's what your sell price would be, minus taxes. And so you've got to consider, what do you need financially to live on? If that business could drive to $1 million EBITDA, or same thing, earnings before taxes, that same multiple of 5x is now worth $5 million. Conversely, if you stated a $5 million business and you made your earnings grow because you worked on the business and you optimized it, and let's say you got another $200,000 of earnings, so now you're up to $700,000. That $200,000 of earnings is also subject to that 5x multiple. It's $1 million. So every dollar you spend or save as a business is multiplied in reality by whatever multiple you get when you exit. So it's substantial dollars. And when business owners think in those terms, all of a sudden they get a renewed interest in working on the business. And it's almost magical. But it's then the day-to-day comes in and the distractions come in. I call it noise. And they have to contend with that, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So we talked about some mistakes that business owners make. What are a couple of things that you see from your perspective that they do often?
Oh, there's quite a few. The number one, I think I'll just repeat what I just said, and that is working in the business and not on the business. Leaders are chartered with creating the vision and leading people to that vision. They're not chartered with being the best at everything that's done in the business. They just happen to be that because they had to, because they're wearing all the hats.
Right.
And as they grow the business, that becomes more complicated because now they're trying to interact with all these different people that they've hired and groomed, but they're all putting out fires. And so they're still working too much in the business. So that's mistake number one for me, is owners work too much in the business. They don't even have the discipline to a great degree, and I don't mean this to be critical, but they don't force themselves to take time to think.
Yeah.
And I pause on that. I want to put an exclamation point on that. Business owners must take time to think, and their leadership teams must make time to think. And unfortunately, the noise of the day-to-day gets in the way. And so it's very costly to have that happen. You've got a culture that isn't optimized, so you got a lot of babysitting going on. you can't win business, or it's just you're bidding a lot, not getting a lot, or once you bid a job and you're bidding on tight margin because you're scrambling to win the business. Now, how do you execute where you can make any money? All the ties together, and all those areas need attention, and in a proactive sense, not in a reactive sense.
Right. I find that people that are working and almost afraid to scale, just with we do very different things, but work with the same types of people. And it's interesting to see those people that can't seem to let go of those daily tasks and pass them on to people. From my perspective, it's usually a trust issue.
I agree.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see how that plays out and all the different pieces that it can affect. So it's definitely a challenge.
I'm going to Kansas City later today for a full day planning session tomorrow with a client. And they're not where they want to be. And they're working hard. They're working very hard. Not sure they're fully capitalized. So that's part of the issue. But they're in a tough environment. I won't give the nature of the business, but trust and commitment and accountability are keys to the recipe for results. And you might be familiar with Pat Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team model. So it starts with trust. So I echo your comment. The trust has to be there to be vulnerable with each other in order to have healthy debate, good, productive conflict without it becoming personal. And from that, you can make a commitment to each other. And therefore, with a commitment, you can be accountable. And if you are accountable and you get your things done, then the results show up, which is the top of the pyramid for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that's the top of the pyramid for the people that you're working with also.
That's my sole focus is, are you working to achieve an activity, or are you trying to drive results? And I share with my clients the definition of responsibility is ownership of activity, but accountability is ownership of results.
So you made me think of something as you were talking about trust and with the team and all of that. What about, how does communication play a part in this?
Oh, it's huge. You struck a nerve with that one, Kim. So scaling up coaches, there's about 200 of us worldwide. I'm proud to be the only one in Missouri, but there's others trying to get certified in that. But worldwide, we do surveys of our clients' employees, all of them, and we do them anonymously. And we ask 4 questions. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What do we keep doing? And what else should management consider, in your opinion? And it's an overwhelming amount of feedback. And these are all done online where it's truly anonymous feedback. And across the world, the number one issue of all companies with these employees' feedback is communication. You're not transparent enough. You don't talk to us. We don't know where we're going. We have no vision. I never get feedback from you. You never ask me my opinion. All these are symptoms of an organization that doesn't value the power of open, bi-directional communications. When you ask the lowest level employees, what do you think? One, they're going to be shocked. You want my opinion? All the way up to the senior levels, they have thoughts and input that if they're not responsible for it, they just let others deal with it. But they have thoughts and opinions. They're doing the work. They know where the skeletons are, if you will.
Right.
And if you're not asking them, you're not getting the benefit of that collective input, nor are they feeling that much integrated into the process of planning. And we do that. In my world, we get all employees involved. We communicate everything that we talk about in these planning sessions. We share that with every employee in quarterly sessions. It's very important to communicate bi-directionally and with a high degree of respect too. There's some communications that are destructive and there's others that are constructive, and you're better skilled at discussing that than me.
Well, it's a huge piece. I see it in the teams that I work with too. And I obviously don't work on the strategy part, but the the communication background, it is shocking. It is shocking to see how things in their processes, that's what I see, where some things in their processes aren't being communicated. That's not what I work on, but that's what I notice. There's where I notice the needs.
It's pretty obvious in most companies. You just go talk with a few people and ask them a few questions. It's very revealing. There's some training that I've gone through called Conversational Intelligence. You know, of course, of IQ and EQ.
Mm-hmm.
This is a body of work around CIQ. And it's fascinating. It really is. It's based on neuroscience. And it helps people understand that when you say things and have conversations with people, inadvertently, you could be triggering them chemically.
Yes.
And if you say something like, well, that's a dumb idea, you just put that person in a defensive mode neurologically.
Right.
Chemically, they're now in a fight or flight. They're now thinking how to defend myself rather than creatively solving the problem, whatever is being discussed. And so there's these conversational dynamics at play in every conversation. And if you're not familiar with that, conversation's a skill. We take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
We utter air and our brains interpret that as meaningful words, right? It's really fascinating. We're the only species on the planet that have this ability, and we take it for granted. There's a cute phrase, I think it was a commanding general that said it. I'm sure I'm going to goof this up, but the problem with communication is the illusion that it actually happened.
That's good.
So if you don't get feedback, if you don't clarify, well, what do you mean by that? I'm not sure. If you just say, well, that's dumb, and you dismiss it because your filters of those words and meanings are different than my filters of those words and meaning, we may not be on the same page, and we likely are not. And I see that all the time. It's really very powerful.
Yeah.
There's actually a book on it, a whole program on that model. It's really fascinating. But going back to your comment about conversations, communications, it's vital, not as a company and a group, it's vital everywhere. But in one-on-one, be it personal or in business, being open and listening without judgment is very difficult. And it really has a high impact for any organization.
Yeah, I agree. I tell people to be curious. Be curious
Yes.
about what that person's view is, because like you said, when you said filters, that just, that's what I talk to people about, is changing those filters that drive our behavior and our actions. It's key, really
Part
is.
of our, I also run that franchise that you mentioned early on, the Alternative Board Peer Advisor and Executive Coaching Organization. And what's interesting there is the exchange of ideas in those meetings. So it's business owners in different industries helping business owners make better decisions. And they're intimately engaged with each other because they're trying to learn, how would you handle this? And then what would you do? And so you can see the contrast, rather than when I see them back in their office and they're now back in the mode of CEO or president and they're barking orders. They're not engaging in the same way. But that feedback, getting ideas from other people is hugely valuable. My website, if you go to it, the very top header says strategy, perspective, and accountability. If you learn from a book, learn from each other, learn from a trade show, anything that you can learn from, why wouldn't you, to make a better decision? Yeah. So I think all that is vital for an effective organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad we went down that road for a minute, because that's something I'm passionate about too. So yeah. So how about one more mistake that you see?
Going it alone.
Going it alone. Oh, that's
going
huge.
It alone.
Yes.
So business owners, for the most part, in fact, when I would say that a good 60 to 70% of business owners that join our peer groups, and there's many of them, and the reason is the same for everybody. It's because they feel like they're operating in a vacuum, that nobody understands their plight, and that they're on an island by themselves. And when they realize that they're not, it's refreshing. It's liberating. And so if they're trying to fight the battle on their own, even within their own four walls, if they're not empowering to the extent of taking a risk with an employee that maybe not fully groomed yet, that's I guess a missed opportunity for me. So you need to be able to trust people, be okay with mistakes. There's a good book by I think it's John Maxwell, Failing Forward. I can't think of the author. Maybe it is John. I'm not sure. But going it alone is really, you become the bottleneck. In fact, there's a cute analogy I use. The bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. So if you think of a Coke bottle or something,
right,
the leader or leaders are the bottleneck.
Yes.
And so are they really the bottleneck, or are they trying to open things up and allow free exchange of ideas and communication? So going it alone is very restrictive. It holds back your growth. It's frustrating. It's unhealthy. It's all reactionary instead of proactive. You're paying a very tall price if you're a business owner and trying to fight the battle on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're in that mindset, you're probably really frustrated and very, very busy because you've got too much. Overwhelmed is what I think.
That is a good word. And for the most part, business owners, if you ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being extremely overwhelmed, you're going to get pretty high scores.
Yeah.
There's just so much. It's a crazy world right now. And we've gone through a very, challenging time, to say the least, the last 2-3 years. And it's not getting any better for business owners. And there's so much unpredictability. It's a very difficult fight. So the more you can lean on others around you, the stronger you're going to be.
Yeah. Totally agree. So we talked about you have a resource that I'd like to talk to people about. Tell us about it's a scaling up assessment.
Yeah, it's very brief. It's the Rockefeller Habits. Actually, it's part of the Rockefeller Habits. So it's a scaling up. It's an assessment for leadership teams to take independently and then compare notes with each other. So it has several dozen questions in the areas of people. And again, the 4 components or 4 pillars of scaling up. Do you have the right people doing the right things? Do you have the right strategy? Are you executing well? And do you have enough cash? It asks questions around those 4 areas, and your answers are very revealing. And what's productive is if you have a leadership team of 5, I'll just pick a number, and everybody does this assessment on their own, which it's free. So I'll give you the site that you can go to and access this. Then you can compare notes and see where your team is not on the same page. And it brings forth very productive conversation. Because if I see, let's say, Kim, you and I are on the same team, and I think we're doing great in the people space, and you think our culture is far from ideal, you're going to score it low, I'm going to score it high. And now we've got a really good basis for a conversation there. And everybody on the team ought to understand how come we're seeing that differently.
Right.
So it's very productive. And again, it's a free assessment. If you want to access this, you go to my website, which is kelsey-group.com, KELSEY-group.com. And then go to the services tab, and under strategic and execution planning at the very bottom of that page is this assessment.
Yeah. And I will put a link. We'll put a link in the podcast comments or in the description so people can just click on it and find it as well.
There you go. There's also another assessment on that site that because you asked what are some things that business owners do that are a mistake, you've got a free guide that you can download, 7 mistakes business owners make and how to avoid them. That's under the peer advisory and executive coaching services tab. It's on the sidebar, and that's free for download also.
Okay. We'll link that one as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for being on today. This was great. So for the people listening, business owners, go to Barry's website and check out these free resources. I know they'll be just really valuable for you. And Barry, I just want to thank you for being on today. You're just full of wisdom. And I know this is going to be a great value to everybody that hears it.
Well, Kim, I appreciate the opportunity. It's a pleasure to know you now. I'm glad we met at our last event, and I look forward to more relationship with you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are you ready to break through the barriers that are holding you back and reach a higher level in your business in just 4 hours? Be sure to click the link today and join other high-achieving professionals that have worked with Kimberly Lebbing to accelerate their success.